Yeah, so Andrew, I reached out to you because I definitely follow your music,
Hmm.
fellow Coloradan, and you've got some cool stuff coming up. But I thought it'd be a good opportunity today to talk about all the different things that you do. And so, why don't we just kind of kick it off with, I'd love to hear about Drunken Hearts, but you've got some other cool stuff happening too, right? Next month, I saw you just posted about an event. So why don't
Hmm.
you tell us a little bit about your music, and we'll go from there.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me, Amanda. Good to see you.
You too.
Yeah, so I've got a bunch of solo gigs coming up in the next month that are kind of more singer-songwriter oriented, and then capped off by I think March 11th, we're doing a songwriter showcase at Whibby Brewing Company that I'm hosting. So that's a bit of a outside of the box thing for me. I haven't actually done that before, but it's something that in the pandemic we kind of developed the idea of. We wanted to take over like Boulder Theater or something like that, and have artists come in, do interviews. Everyone can collaborate and jam. They can perform solo, tell the story, kind of like these little mini episodes. And I did one with Tim Carbone, and it was really fun. And I started working on another one with the Kitchen Dwellers, and it just it we never executed. We did the first one. It was called The Last Shot, I think, and we streamed it on Facebook and all that stuff. And so this is kind of more. Obviously this is in person. There will be seats. So if you get there early, you can sit down. But it's going to be more of like a listening room type of environment. And we'll tell the stories behind some songs, maybe play a couple cover songs, and dig in to some of our favorite songwriters as well. Because the lineup is Bonnie and Taylor Sims from Big Richard and Everybody Loves an Outlaw, and then Joy Adams from Big Richard, and her husband Andy Reiner on fiddle. Joy is a cello player. Andy plays fiddle. And then we have Emma Rose, the bass player from Big Richard, as well as Charlie Rose, unrelated, but the banjo player and pedal steel player from Elephant Revival. So at the end, once we go through, Bonnie and Taylor will be a set. Joy and Andy will be another set. Charlie and Emma will do a set. I'll kind of do a opening set, um, and kind of MC the whole thing, and then at the end we will do like a big jam where we might like cover one of our favorite, lyrical songs or something like that.
Oh,
Um,
like,
so it's not really something that I've done before, and it's just something that I've kind of wanted to do. So I've got some solo shows this month leading up to that, but no Drunken Heart stuff until March 18th.
that's cool though. I mean, I think what you just described to me is so like quintessential Colorado music scene, and it's almost like the
Mm.
folk roots bluegrass version of some of the super group jams that Cervantes does
Mm.
occasionally, which
Sure,
are great because it's all bands that people love, but you get to see everybody in a slightly different context, like the storytelling aspect. I mean, is that
totally.
to me that feels like something that would be great for you as an artist also, something a little different.
Yeah, I mean, it's not super often that you get to kind of delve into your creative process and see other artists' creative process as well. I think, like I said, I'll start off with a song or two of my own and then hand it over to the other acts, let them do the same. They can also, if they don't want to just perform as the duo, they can add instrumentation from the rest of the lineup to accompany them on their songs as well. So, I might play solo, I might have mandolin and electric guitar accompany me and cello, and then, I'll leave it up to each act on the bill to curate their own little mini set from the instrumentation.
Nice. Very cool. I feel like I should mention at this point, I don't know if you would remember, this was during COVID. You had mentioned pandemic times, the live out front music. I think I'm remembering that correctly. Um, it was Drunken Thorns, as you and Andy had played at my friend Elisa's house, and I
Hmm.
spun some music before you all got up
Oh yeah.
there, and the storytelling aspect of that, especially at that time for all of us, was just like amazing because I think we were all just so missing the experience of going to see music, collectively.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to that.
Yeah, that was fun. Very intimate porch set with Drunken Thorny. Um,
That's right. It was awesome.
and yeah, I love playing with Andy. We used to be roommates, so it's fun to kind of do that. We have our own little shtick and stuff that we can do, so that was fun. Elise has talked about doing it again,
Yes, she has.
but
She has mentioned.
scheduling that one is tricky.
Absolutely. And, I think just kind of taking that out a little bit broader, um, I think that the music that you've put together and that you've released with Drunken Hearts, to me, is in itself, I think, a really interesting kind of combination of what I would consider that kind of Americana roots folk music. And I'd love to know just kind of like how you got into that. Is that where you started? I know you mentioned, roommates with Andy and all, but like, is that your origin point, or is it something a little different?
Um, well, so I had always kind of been into live music, even in high school and college. I started taking guitar lessons, and I was a creative writing major in college, an English major. At the time, I thought I wanted to write a novel, which I worked on for a long time, and just never tried to get it published. But eventually, my life had taken some interesting turns post college that I did not expect, and um, I was a children's ski instructor in Vail for about 6 months, 7 months until I just like could not handle it anymore and decided I needed to figure out some other life path. So I ended up starting Yarmany Music Festival that summer at State Bridge, at the original State Bridge Lodge, with Bill Nershi from String Cheese and Scott Law, who plays with Phil Lesh a bit, and Billy's wife Jillian, and kind of got into the concert promotion side of things for a little bit. While meanwhile, I started taking guitar lessons from Scott Law, both virtually, as well as we would do kind of like 3 or 4 day guitar summits, we called them, where we would go out to my parents used to have this like cabin out on the Colorado River, and so we would go out there, and there's all this. It had all the facilities and kitchen and French presses and stuff like that to keep us caffeinated. But so that was my own music was kind of like developing as I got into the business side of music. And then eventually, I realized that I also, as a writer, could contribute lyrically and ultimately, eventually, musically speaking as well. So I just kind of found the niche that I guess I didn't really realize where it was going to go back in college when I started focusing on writing. But it's the perfect combination of the two worlds that I was coming from.
So event stuff, because I did a little bit of that years ago. I mean, it definitely teaches you some empathy for just what has to happen to make the show. I don't know. I
Mhm.
mean, what do you like? What did you take from that experience? Because Yarmany is incredible. I mean, it's just one of those events that people remember, even if they've only been to it once. But yeah, like, what did you bring with that to what you do now?
Well, there's a big collaborative aspect of Yarmany. Many years in a row, we would have Billy Nershi close the whole festival, or at least Saturday night, with the joint set, um, which was always, the quote unquote cluster pluck,
Yeah.
um, where we could have anywhere from 12 to 22. I think at Yarmany 2008, I want to say there were like 23 people or 25 people on stage or something. um, Real Road Earth, Hot Buttered Rum, Ali Crowell from Cornmeal, Kevin Watson, myself. There were a lot of people on stage. And so I don't know, that was just something that like in the spirit of the festival that I think I probably learned some of that from Billy himself, just from kind of being around that whole like backstage, kind of thrown together in the minute, like, okay, it's an hour before showtime, like, what are we gonna do with a festival's worth of musicians to make it feel like a big, you know, collaborative family jam?
Willie Nelson always does that.
Yeah,
He has
Willie.
like everybody on stage come the end of the show.
Yeah, Willie is obviously, legend. But yeah, and so then that's just something that I think I kind of picked up from him, and then we did it a year ago at the Boulder Theater. Actually, we hosted a big fire benefit for victims of the Marshall Fire, and Billy, in prime fashion, led the charge, and we got I think like another 25 people on stage um, for the last like 3 songs or 4 songs, something like ridiculous, like a sound guy's nightmare for sure. He's
Yeah,
like,
I
wait,
think
how many songs are you gonna do this for?
Everybody gets a hot mic. It doesn't
yeah,
matter.
I think there were some informal bets going on at one point about because it's the Boulder Theater, Last Waltz Revisited or that show. Like, what's the most amount of people that have ever been on that stage at one time? I think you all won. Actually, I think you got it. Somebody counted.
Yeah, it was like 25, I think, or something like that. There's a
That was
photo of it uh, on the anniversary of that show. I uploaded one of the photos to our cover photo on the band's page, so
yeah.
you can count.
Very, very meaningful, especially for those of us that live out here. But just to see that kind of like true community support, I think everybody needed that, regardless of how they may have been affected directly
Mhm.
by that or not.
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of factors at play. Obviously, the community was reeling from the loss of 990 homes, and the thousands and thousands and thousands of people that were all of a sudden homeless and had lost all their belongings. But also, COVID was very much still like in play, if you
Hmm.
recall. And at least for me, as someone who I didn't have a ton of opportunities to play music during the pandemic. I mean, we played probably 10 to 20 shows a year since it's happened, as opposed to 50. Um, so relatively speaking. But at that point, indoor shows weren't really a thing. It was, the Delta had like come through the summer, and there was Omicron, and you just didn't like know. And at that point, I think we all were, the bans were starting to be lifted like the week or two out, and everyone was like, "We're okay. How many tickets have we sold?" And we're like, "It's pretty much sold out." Like, well, I guess we're gonna have a full Boulder Theater because why not? Like it's time to go back to some sort of like normalcy, and we did it. And I mean, the backstage there was probably like 80 people backstage and 1,300 people there, and not one person got COVID that we heard about. Of course, it
You
was, it was like the perfect lull in the whole thing
you
to
only
have something like that happen with
you
zero
only get
consequence. So,
you only get COVID at Fish at Madison Square Garden,
yeah,
apparently,
right. Yeah, right.
Vegas.
Or Vegas. Yeah,
or
exactly.
Vegas, right? Yeah.
It's been
Right. No,
a
but so that was a really, really fun night. It got played pretty blurry in there, with the bottle of tequila going around in
Nice.
Nershi true style.
yeah. Oh, yeah. I have a funny story about that. If we have time, I'll share it. But it does involve COVID and a New Year's Eve greeting and some tequila. But in any case, you can all imagine where that might go.
Yeah.
Uh, so Kevin and I talk about this all the time, and maybe it's because we're in 23 now, which is maybe long enough ago where we can think back on 2020 and 21 in a little bit of a different way. But it's always, I think, really meaningful and honestly really fascinating to ask people, about that time, because I know that you have put out the Wildflower Sessions in 22,
Mhm.
and I was curious what, if anything, the COVID era had to do with that particular release, or maybe other things you were working on too.
Um, Definitely. I mean, those were all COVID songs that I wrote, during 2020 through 2022, really. New Reseda, I had written out in California. That was the only one that wasn't quite COVID. I played it all through COVID, so it felt like COVID, but I had written it like late January of 2020 or something like that. So all the other ones, though, um, Nightmare in Raton, I wrote that one about a experience I had in Big Sur, California. That was, relative to Kerouac's Big Sur, and kind of inspired by those kind of like nightmarish events um, in that area. And that was during the pandemic. That was like June of 2020, that was full lockdown. I remember on that trip, the national parks had just opened up, and we were like, let's go to Big Sur, and there were just people in masks everywhere. I mean, it was very like end of days, kind of apocalyptic, just like,
Totally.
you weren't like talking to people, like my fiance and we had just gotten engaged that weekend actually. Um, and it was just very like people weren't socializing, it was mask on, you were with your group, and that was it. And, your pod, you didn't talk to anybody else basically. So that was definitely pandemic. I mean, the lyrics have nothing to do with that experience, but it was during that time. Uh, Beat Up, Beat Down, and Broken was a song that I wrote about my friend Brock, who passed away unexpectedly in August of 2020. And we went out to an ash scattering ceremony in uh, Orange County, where we rode out on surfboards and like scattered his ashes in the ocean. And um, during the ceremony, the preacher said, "We are all broken, but we all still shine." That was like this line that I, instantly wrote down. Got back to Colorado the next day and wrote that song. So that one felt like that should be on there. And then let's see, Glass and Sand and End of the Ride. I think thematically are very similar,
Mhm.
as far as like, you know, uh, just kind of like, I guess like picking the interest of like how long you can actually do this for, and how long we're going to be here. Um, you know, Whether it's singing songs or being on the planet itself, like how what's the amount of time that we can do this. And so yeah, there was just there's a lot of tragic stuff going on in the pandemic, so some of the subject matter isn't always pretty, but
But it's
um
universal. I mean, and I think it's like that manages to cross the very personal side, of all the things you just mentioned, but also very relatable,
mhm.
especially, you put yourself back there.
I
Um,
think, yeah, both of those songs actually for me kind of represent like a turn for me in my songwriting where I'm not really like writing songs for anyone else anymore.
mhm.
Like I'm doing it like for me. And if people like it, that's awesome. But if not, it's more about like my own personal experience and, trying to deal with my own personal shit than, you know, making music that I think people are going to listen to, if that makes sense. Or
Oh,
like if
yeah.
it's, mainstream or, that whole deal.
So who else is
Um,
in the who else is in the band with you? You want to talk a little bit about the band? How that got
yeah,
together?
yeah. So the band has changed lineup several times at this point, and to the point where and in the pandemic, it kind of like formally changed from one thing to another. Um, and just some people needed to get jobs, some people got engaged and moved away, Some people moved to Nashville. Some people, didn't want to tour anymore. It was all positive. There wasn't a lot of negativity surrounding it. It was more just like, this is what is happening, and we're just going to go with the flow. And, it will always work itself out in the end, regardless of whether or not you think it will. um, and yeah, so we shifted from kind of the pre-pandemic lineup to the current lineup, which has James Dumb on electric guitar, and he's from the Wildflower. He was on Wildflower Sessions as well. Tyler Adams on keys, and then at the moment we've got Nick Summers on drums, who has not been featured on any of that stuff, and then Drew Packard on bass. So those are the guys that we've been playing with since pretty much like Winter Wondergrass last year. We kind of made a transition. I was playing with a couple of guys a year ago who are just so busy and such talented musicians that they're in like 3 or 4 bands, and it just became physically impossible to schedule all of it. Um, we had to sort that whole thing out, and now it seems like that's sorted itself out. We've got a new album in the can that'll be out hopefully in June. We'll know more about that this week. But it was produced by a guy named Dave Pahanish, who has written several #1 country songs for like Toby Keith and Tim McGraw, Keith Urban. Some really, you know, technically it's far. I don't want to say far right, but a big step towards country, like Nashville country, which is not obviously our thing. But I was really kind of inspired by Dave when I met him and his songwriting approach, and also just how we hit it off. It was just very natural. It was a fluke to begin with. I didn't realize my agent had reached out to him because they were high school friends. And at some point, I was in Nashville, so I decided to hit him up to do a songwriting session, and we wrote a song called "Falling Stars" in about, I don't know, under 2 hours after meeting each other, which is pretty good when you don't actually like know the person you're sitting across from, in my opinion. And anyways, on my way out, I said if I was going to record this, where would I record it in Nashville, and who would you get to produce it? And he said, you could do it in my studio, and I would produce it, and save you a bunch of money, and so I said, okay, yeah, let's do it. And we booked some more time at that point. For like a month and a half later, I'd come back to Nashville and we'd start working on recording that song. In the meantime, I sent him 10 more songs that we then co-wrote together. But uh, but yeah, as we're getting back to his truck, I go, oh, well, like, when's the last time you talked to Derek, who is my agent? Expecting him to be like, oh, like we just talked, a couple weeks ago or last. He was like, oh, I haven't heard from Derek in 30 years. And, I of course thought that they, had a, not to say that they're not close, but it just reflected on how kind of like random this interaction was, and like unplanned, just kind of a fluke. I wouldn't call it a fluke, but kind of a fluke. um, a chance encounter, I suppose, that like, had I known how obscure it was, I might not have pursued it, to say.
What's it going to be called?
It's called Reckless Ways of Living.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's my autobiography. Wait.
Yeah. Yeah. And so yeah, we're hoping to get it out by June, but hopefully sometime this summer. We'll
Okay.
stop dropping some singles here in the next month or two.
Awesome.
But
That's
yeah, it has Vince Herman on it. Vince and I co-wrote a song on it. And then all the songs are co-writes with Dave. So that was a three-way write with Vince. And then I wrote one of the songs, the opening track, "Never Say Goodbye," with Keith Mosley from String Cheese. And so that one is another Try Right. And then Silas Herman from Vince Herman Band, Vince Herman Stud, plays mandolin on about half of the record. The pedal steel player from American Aquarium, Neil Jones, is on about half of it. Lindsay Lou and Kyle Tuttle are on a track. Vince plays bass and kazoo on two different songs. Um, and then we've got Alex Johnson, who is he moved to Nashville recently. He was the most previous permanent member as on the drums. That was Ted Wells originally, but Alex took over for Ted in 2014, and he was the drummer until recently when he moved to Nashville. So he plays drums on it because he was there in town and is an incredible drummer. And then Adrian Engfer from Grant Farm and Kind Hearted Strangers plays on a couple tracks. And then James Dunn, Tyler Adams, and Drew Packard from the band play on a couple tracks, or they play on like most of the record actually. But yeah, so it's kind of Jason Carter from Del McCoury Band is on fiddle for a song. So we've got kind of like this big.
Is it branded as just you, or is it branded as you and the band?
It's Drunken Hearts.
Okay.
Yeah, it's Drunken Hearts, Reckless Ways of Living, which, at this point, I guess that's kind of where I was going with the whole, who is in the band, etc. While we do have like the staples in the live show, just with the way that things have shaken out, with the pandemic and how, it's always basically been my band to begin with. I own the business, I own the van. um, I get to do all the fun stuff,
Yep.
all the administrative stuff, the taxes. Um, at the moment, it just seems like the most convenient thing for us is to promote it with a live photo from a live show, or if it's a press photo, it's a press photo of me. And, I am Drunken Hearts. It's just,
Yeah,
that's me and my band. And
totally.
if it's me solo, it's Andrew McConaughey. But, you know, Drunken Hearts means like it's me with a full band. Um,
Yep.
so, so yeah, I did think about releasing this as Andrew McConaughey, and it's all good. It's more of a bluegrass country feel than previous Drunken Hearts stuff, which I also like. It's good to have a different feel for everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the update on the album and the client or the personnel that we're working with these days. But it sounds better than ever. The tracks are super cool and they're all different. And it's definitely more of like I wouldn't say a pop country thing, but definitely more arranged and accessible songwriting.
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, each of those people you mentioned, and I've already forgotten half because it's just so many amazing names, but they're going to bring that flavor of what they do. And I'm going to totally butcher this, but when you were just explaining about, your role in the band, in Bruce Springsteen's autobiography, he had a nice little section about how he views that too, right? And how he had to kind of make that decision early on about, no, this is mine. I'm doing all the things. I'm managing everything, and so ultimately, it's my decision. But the band
right.
is super important, right? I mean, obviously, we can't do it without them. But at the end of the day, I'm going to figure out where I want this to go, and that's kind of what's going to happen. And
Yeah,
it's
that's a great comparison. It's or a great explanation, not a great comparison, but a great explanation. Um, but
so
yeah, it definitely at one point in the pandemic, which we also learned, don't make any like brash decisions during the pandemic. Like this might not be a permanent thing. Don't do anything you're not gonna like want to take back, like change the band name. Which at one point I changed it to Andrew McConaughey and the Drunken Hearts, because it just seemed like a better explanation of everything.
right,
And then I realized quickly that like that's a mouthful, and it just kind of like complicates things even further. So then I just truncated it to Drunken Hearts. No the The Drunken Hearts refers to the band before the pandemic.
Yeah.
Now we're Drunken Hearts. So
Yep.
it's like it's an emotional state of being. Has nothing to do with alcohol or sobriety for that matter.
Right on.
Drunken
So
Hearts on Valentine's Day.
Exactly.
actually, I get that. Perfect. So I'm curious. You mentioned Vince, and obviously, he's equated with Nashville
Hmm.
more and more as the last couple years go on. And I remember when he was out there. I guess it was. I don't know exactly what year, when he's working on that solo album. And I remember reading some interviews about. I don't know if he coined this phrase or if someone else did, but the Tao of Nashville record making or something. And I remember reading a lot about. Listen, I mean, like we come from the jam band bluegrass scene. That's its own world.
Hmm.
But how he found making records and that process out in Nashville. I mean, did you find it generally to be different than what you're used to? Like, is there really a thing out there
Yeah.
that's unique?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's just so many. Okay, there's just music everywhere. There's like the resources at your fingertips. That was the other reason why we ended up using so many guests because why not? He
Mhm.
was, he has his own studio musicians that he knows, but I knew 20 people we could have invited into the studio that lived 20 minutes away that I wouldn't be able to work with in Colorado because I'd need to fly them out. So it just kind of felt, and we'd sit down, we'd cut the demo for a song, and then we'd talk about instrumentation. And he'd say, "Yeah, I'm really hearing a lot of pedal steel on this. We got to find a good pedal steel player." And I'd say, "Well, when I flew in last night, we went to this honky tonk dive bar, and I met this dude. He's from American Aquarium. He was the best pedal steel player I'd ever seen. Like, and he gave me his number. We're ready to. He'll be out here tomorrow morning." Just things like that where people are there to make music. Like they're not really, or to be in the music business. That's obviously there's a lot of people that aren't in either of those things that are there, but the amount that are there compared to elsewhere is staggering. But yeah, so I definitely think that there is something to be said for Nashville, and I would absolutely love to do another record with Dave in Nashville, which I'm planning, Reckless Ways of Living too.
Enough to go around, right?
Yeah.
Do
But
you?
so this needs to be mentioned while we were talking about Vince. Dave Pahanish, the producer, that was said after we decided to work together and keep kind of chipping away at stuff. And we're driving back into Nashville in his old farm truck. He asked me, "Have you ever heard of this band called Leftover Salmon?" And again, we're from like totally different worlds. I'm over here, he's like way over here, and like this shouldn't even be happening. But and I said, "Yeah, I know. I've heard of Leftover Salmon." Like I'm supposed to play with Vince's son in 3 days, and I was roommates with the banjo player. Um, and I go, why? He goes, "Oh, well, through this publishing company or some publishing deal that he has, uh, I got hooked up with Vince Herman, and I wrote a few songs for his solo album, including the title track, Enjoy the Ride." And so he had already co-written all that stuff with Vince before any of this, and we were just like randomly connecting. So then it just made sense to get Vince involved. So we instantly said, "Well, let's call Vince and do a session with him," because that's what people do in Nashville. They go like write music together and you know put songs out and shit. So so yeah, it was all just very like spur of the moment. Like that's a weird like concentric circle. Like we went and saw Vince Herman band play one night while we were there, and Dave and his wife came, and Lindsay Lou and Jason Carter were there. So hey, I should get you guys on the track. um,
Totally.
and then the track that we were gonna have Lindsay on, I Dave sent me a version back, and he had added banjo, and I was like, well, if we're sending this to Lindsay, we should also send this to her boyfriend, national banjo player Kyle Tuttle, and have them both on the track. And so he's like, okay, sure. So boom, these things just, it was very organic, the whole process. And it was pretty much done in late August. I think we did 3 sessions, one in August, one in October, one in November. And then we finished mastering about a month ago. So
Wow.
relatively speaking, that's pretty damn quick, especially when you're talking about recording in another state.
Oh yeah. No,
But then
absolutely.
I had the Colorado guys record in Longmont, so we were kind of, split between Colorado, and then I would fly back to Nashville. We'd do all the guests there, and then the core Drunken Hearts guys would do their stuff here. Some of it's even in their home studios, which you would not know it.
That's cool.
How do you view we're talking about studio and recordings and product? How does that work for you now with, I guess vinyl's coming back, but the demise of physical music, it's all streaming. Would you have any views on streaming and what the future might look like?
Well, doesn't seem like vinyl is going to go away anytime soon. For instance, this record, it started out as one EP, one 5 song. It was, by the time I got back to Nashville for the second session or for the first recording session, I had 5 songs instead of one. So originally the concept was, well, let's just do another 5 song EP like we did for Wildflower Sessions and, get it out relatively quickly. And then, we went back and did the other session and knocked out another 4 or 5 songs. And I said, Dave, like, we got to do a full, okay, we got to do a full record. And so the original concept was one 5 song EP. Then it was 2 5 song EPs that fit together as one vinyl. And so, yeah, there is, because I have a previous relationship with a record manufacturer, because we did Wheels of the City on vinyl, I can actually still get vinyl at a reasonable rate and on like a 3 month turnaround time. But if you hadn't pressed vinyl before the pandemic and you were trying to press, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find someone that could, I mean, you can buy 1,000 vinyl at a time. It's, takes up a lot of space.
We've been blaming Adele for the lack of
Right.
vinyl.
It's Adele's fault and Beyonce. And now Rihanna. As of last night, Rihanna's fault too.
He can handle it, they're strong.
Yeah, but yeah. So I think vinyl is definitely here to stay. And the streaming thing, there's aspects of it that I think are really cool. There's aspects of it that I think are super lame. I haven't really gotten a decision as to like what my overall opinion is because I'm also just trying to like stay caught up with it. And the last thing I want to do is be caught bitching about it while something else happens.
Right.
There's this analogy that my friend and I used to make. I always heard that Tony Rice would not fly to anything. He wouldn't fly, period. He just didn't fly. He would drive a Cadillac or like a Mustang, a rental Mustang. He'd have somebody rent him a Mustang and he'd drive, across the country with his, I think he had poodles and his guitars, and we had this joke that he's so like, traditional bluegrass, like in a suit, that he'd kind of shake a pitchfork at that damn flying machine, as it flew over his head. And that, I don't want to be, you don't want to be that guy unless you're Tony Rice. But you don't want to be that guy with the streaming services.
Right. I hear
stay caught up with the times and we'll be fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's changing so quickly. I mean, now your Spotify, your profile can have a video, or like your song can have a video through Spotify, and like it's only like a 15-second video, and it's only on your phone. And then there's like canvases, and It's a lot. It's like a full-time job, just like staying caught up with streaming services. But I actually just I switched over to the new platform today, or not today, but for this new release. As far as like how to distribute digitally.
Bandcamp? Are
Um,
you on Bandcamp?
we don't use a lot of Bandcamp. This is called Symphonic. I was using DistroKid before, but this is called Symphonic. It seems like the returns are a lot friendlier than anything I've seen, as well as how large their distribution network is.
Oh, cool.
So, but yeah, I was just trying to figure this out from a streaming standpoint. If I release 2 to 3 singles per side and then release them each as a 5 song EP, how does that then work when I re-upload the whole thing as 10 songs? And I also did instrumental versions of these as like a bonus version. So it's just kind of like background music. That
Do,
has
do
like a
all
very
do all the
different.
downloads count together for that one song? You since it's in three
I
different
don't
places.
think so,
Yeah, I don't
but
think so either.
my point is, I mean, is that going to take away from? Am I cannibalizing my own streams here? Do I just want to also like how much work am I cutting out for myself to
Well,
like
we
upload all these
singles,
things separately, you
right?
know?
We hear
So
singles are the big thing
I
from
think
other
I'm just gonna
musicians.
do I think I'm gonna do 6 singles in one album now, and then the vinyl will be be 2 sides,
Right.
and I'm not ordering CDs. So
What about
yeah,
cassette tapes? We've seen a few bands do
yeah.
cassette tapes recently.
Yeah, no, I mean, if I had a cassette tape player,
Right.
I would definitely want my own music to play in there, but
Bring back
I don't
the
have
cassette
one.
single.
Yeah, or the mini disc player.
Right, the mini, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the
No,
mini disc.
Kevin
Yeah,
hears me say this all the time. So I have a couple different cassette players of varying qualities, and I rehome people's cassettes, whether they're something that they bought in Sam Goody or just live stuff. And
nice.
it is just one of those things that once you
There
get
you
into
go.
it, it's like this, the redheaded stepchild of the vinyl world. But I've embraced it over the last however many decades, and now I'm
Very
in.
cool.
I can't do anything
Mixtapes,
about it.
making mixtapes were probably the single most important thing I did in high school.
The
I
most
mean,
romantic thing that you could ever do
right,
for
exactly.
And
another person.
memorable,
Yeah.
and memorable for sure. Well, it was so accessible. Um, Actually, I saw Timmy this weekend when they were playing out here, Tim Carbone, and
Hmm. I know. I
I,
was bummed I missed him.
I was able to actually tell him about a podcast he hadn't heard of, and I was like, "Whoa!" Just all about the record industry and when everything first started, how that was such a threat in a major way to
Mm.
artists. This is going back,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
the 30s or so, and just putting so many musicians out of business who were working in movie theaters and other places. You just didn't need them anymore. And so, in some ways, I think similar stories, similar feelings, but just the reach continues to grow, and that's where I think things.
The record companies got scared of the radio, and radio got scared of MTV.
Yeah, and now we're all scared of TikTok.
Right? Yeah.
I am. That, people send me links. I'm like, oh, I don't know. For some reason, I'm resistant out of everything
Now
else.
the
No
the
sense.
big indicator there is when my father is sending me TikToks that my grandmother is CC'd on. That's when you know that like
Jump the shark.
this is trending. Like it's happened already, and I've thought about kind of really like digging into that kind of thing for like a social media presence, and some people are really good at it and it comes really natural to them. And I'm okay being in front of a camera, photos, interviews, things like that, or even like, live recording, things like that, performing. But there's something about the whole TikTok process that and again, maybe I'm, you know, the
You're a
boomer here.
boomer. It's okay.
Really
But
similar. It's
but I
okay.
don't know. I mean, I've thought long and hard about it, and it's certainly an approach. A friend of mine um, is in, well, her brother is in a band. I'm totally spacing on the name of the band now, but they're like straight up TikTok famous. Maybe Girl Talk. That's a DJ, I think. But anyways, it's something like that. Girl something, and they've got millions and millions of Spotify followers, and it all stemmed from a TikTok video that went viral, and
Mm.
that's one way to do it.
Sync licensing is another. That's my favorite way to see a band get
Right.
a song in a movie or a commercial. You make money forever off of it. A little something.
Yeah, exactly.
was-
Trying to get that whole aspect figured out as well. But there's, like I said, there's so many facets to it at this point. And that you can, create revenue, the revenue streams. It's really easy to sit there and say, the spot of digital streaming sucks. But then it's like, well, do you have all this other shit set up that, ancillary income that's not just relying upon streaming now that there aren't physical sales?
Or playing live, which is its
Playing
own.
live, you sell, I'll still sell some CDs. I don't usually bring them, but you'll have people ask, it's funny, it's in certain regions, like you go to Montana and you're playing at like Pine Creek Lodge. There's a lot of like ranchers out there with, trucks, and they're still crushing CDs,
And the UFOs probably block the satellite signals.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's, you gotta stay hip to the curve.
Like, what are your socials?
Let's see, Facebook.com, /the Drunken Hearts. We couldn't actually change all of the handles, so it is what it is. Instagram is also at the Drunken Hearts, and then the website is also thedrunkenhearts.com. But everything else is Drunken Hearts.
Oh man.
I love that. I like make the decision. I upload it to Spotify, and then you go look, and you're like, "Wait, I can't even change it on Facebook or Instagram."
Forget Twitter. I had a years-long battle to just be the PhDJ, and now I'm your PhDJ, and I can't take it. It's just like the one thing that's not.
Oh no.
They blocked me. I mean, it just gets to a point where like, wow, I'm fighting with this like non-entity entity about a
It's
pronoun.
probably AI. Yeah, it's probably AI responding to you.
I lost big time. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I learned my lesson the hard way too. I combined, so over time I had uploaded all these various profiles, specifically to Spotify. And when I tried to combine them, DistroKid, the platform that I was previously using, and this isn't like a dish, I'm not trying to like, dish on them or anything, but like, they said you can do this. We don't recommend it though because you're going to lose a bunch of your followers who don't subscribe to all the things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, that'll be like 500 people. And I lost like, I don't know, I want to say like 80%, 85% of my followers.
Oh, geez.
So once Wildflower Sessions came out, that was like the release when I had combined all of them. That one got like really, really low traction. And then now, once I put Sunlight out with Big Richard, I've seen my numbers start to kind of like trend back in the right direction. But they told me that would happen. From a branding perspective, I said, I kind of need all the platforms to reflect the same band. And so then I switched and I had the new platform, Symphonic, combined them on Apple Music, and it was like the easiest thing ever. They didn't say anything about, followers, and it was done like instantly. So I'm not sure if it's DistroKid that hoed me or if I hoed myself, but
It might be the platform.
learning experience.
It might be
Yeah.
Apple versus Spotify too. How their internal.
Yeah,
It could be.
totally.
I don't know why you can't just drag every
so-
follower over with you.
Yeah,
I don't know.
mean,
Let's not get in the weeds.
it was it was a learning experience, but now that I've got all the profiles branded correctly, we can now upload new Drunken Hearts music. And
There you
that's
go.
all that matters.
That's right. Oh my gosh, Andrew, I'm looking at the time. I feel bad. I think we've gone over a little
Oh,
bit.
all good.
I want to
Perfect.
be respectful. This has been truly so much fun, and I'm just really grateful that that you were able to come on and chat. Um, Definitely, we'll be sharing loggers and lyrics. I'm excited for that one in March. And
Awesome.
do you have just last thing? I guess do you have touring plans? Or are you going to think about touring around the new album and getting the world's biggest bus to fit everybody inside that
Yeah,
contributed?
that would be amazing. We had a couple different release date shows that we've had to kind of go back to the starting block on, unfortunately. But the original concept was a venue in Denver that was going to accommodate all the guests on the album. I had a date that was potentially going to work for everyone, which is insane. And then it got screwed up. And now I'm looking at I'm looking at a really cool venue that would be better than what we were planning before in June. We're just waiting to see if we've got the date we challenged on it, and then there'll be some touring. We've got some shows this summer, and looking at going back to Oregon, Utah, Southern Colorado, and yeah, wherever else people want us to play, we'll come play for them.
Awesome. Oh, that's so great. Well, thank you again. And we will definitely be, I know Kevin mentioned this at the beginning, I think, of our chat, but he does an awesome job of kind of pulling out bits from these conversations
Great,
and aligning them with timing of different things. So,
sweet.
um, yeah, so that's something that we'll definitely keep you updated on and, share wherever we can on
I don't know
all.
if I'll be able to tag everybody that's on that album.
Yeah,
We can get 30
yeah,
tags.
I only get 140 characters on Twitter, so
Yeah.
yeah. And when we get closer to a single release date, we'll get the single to you guys
and
too.
if you want, yeah, do that. We did something for Kendall Street Company where Lewis came on, talked to me about the new single. We played a little clip of it, and that was the whole thing 3 days before it
Hmm.
was released. So if you want to do that, just reach out
Yeah,
to us and we can nail that down.
Super quick
that'd be
and
awesome.
Yeah,
yeah,
it'd be a
it was
15-minute thing that we talk, and I'd
I
have
love
it done in an
that. Yeah,
hour.
that'd be great.
cool.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah,
All right,
let's
Well,
do it.
let me stop. Let me stop and